Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Gordon, Executive Director of the National Sports Media Association. And thanks, as always, to Greater Winston-Salem, Inc., who you see on my little virtual background there. They are our sponsor for this Paying It Forward, Paying It Back series. And we are ecstatic to be joined by two pros today. Debbie Antonelli, who many of you know as basketball analyst on ESPN and CBS, and Nancy Hogshead-Makar, who I love your Twitter handle, Nancy, with the 3AU, because Australia, is that where she won? It's like, no, AU is gold. 3 gold medals in swimming. And coincidentally, maybe not, these are both ACC alums. Nancy went to Duke and Debbie went to NC State, so I didn't do that purposefully, but here we are. So welcome, both of you. And as I think I've told you before, and rather than me reading line by line through your bio, I always find it more interesting when you tell how you got to where you are. So we'll go alphabetically, and I guess, Debbie, it's good to be an A.
Yeah. Thank you, Dave. And let me first say that I am so thrilled to get a chance to spend some time with Nancy before the call, and I know I'll be spending some time with her afterwards. I'm honored to serve on this panel with her. So thank you, Nancy, for allowing me to be a co-pilot with you today. I do work for ESPN and CBS. This will be my 33rd year on the air. I'm pretty proud of that fact that I've been able to stick around that long and to make myself a valued part of college basketball. I played at NC State. I have a double major in business management economics. I have a master's degree at Ohio University in sports administration. My husband and I live in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, which is a suburb of Charleston. We have 3 boys, Joey, 25, Frankie, 23, Patrick is 18. All of my guys play sports. My youngest is a D3 point guard at Emory and Henry. My middle son, Frankie's at Clemson in the Clemson Life program. And my oldest son already graduated from South Carolina in the sports management program. I just spoke at the Citadel yesterday, so I'll keep this quick. I'm on 4 nonprofit boards, one of which is KL Cancer Fund, which is one that I'm very proud of because that's my coach. And we've done a great job in raising awareness and money for women's cancers. I serve on a couple of other basketball-related nonprofits, but I run a couple of women's basketball tournaments. I run some camps. I'm on the Nike skills staff. I'm actually heading from here into the gym with 25 little girls to work on some pivots and some V-cuts. This is a time of year that I'm usually not here, so I get to take advantage of my time at home to try to spend time serving and teaching and doing the things I love. I think we're going to get into some of the camps and stuff that I do later, but Mount Pleasant is an incredible place to live and a great place to raise your family. And I hope all of you are staying well and staying safe and healthy. And, as far as my job, my schedule is not quite 50-50 men and women, but it's getting closer. I cover the ACC and the SEC on the men and women's side, and then the women's side on the national scene. And I just did 33 WNBA games from home. And that was pretty interesting and a very new way of our industry evolving and changing. And it worked out pretty well. I called every game in a pair of shorts with no shoes on. I was 8 steps to the restroom and 18 to the post-game refreshments.
There you go.
Love it.
Well, I've known you, Deb, for a long time. Just gotten acquainted with Nancy on the phone, and happy, Nancy, you could join us. So what's your story?
Well, you're going to find out that one of us is not a broadcaster and is not nearly as smooth as Debbie is. So, Dave, thank you so much for having me on here today. I really appreciate this. And it's great to be able to be here with Debbie, for her to be on national television for 33 years is extraordinary and really a trailblazer. You're opening up a lot of doors for women behind you. So thank you very much for your living example of what it is what you do. I started off, as he was saying, at Duke University, and And after I took some time off college to go train for the 1984 Olympics, where I did win those 3 gold medals and a silver. That was 8 years as a world-class athlete. It's hard for me to talk about my childhood without talking about sports. From there, I went to law school at Georgetown University Law School, and then worked for a big firm. And like I always, the reason why I went to law school and the reason why I was pursuing the legal avenue is that the part that I liked after the Olympics, I did a bunch of different things. I actually did broadcasting, Debbie, and I was so bad at it. I can't even, I actually tried hard, and Donna Deverona is a role model of mine, and I hired coaches and everything else, but the truth was I didn't care. Whereas when it came to the legal stuff, I really did care about who won and who lost in the legal battles. And I knew how important the My Sports experience was to me, and I wanted to make sure that other women had the same opportunities to be able to participate. But for this law called Title IX, I would not have gotten a college scholarship. I would not have been participating. I would have stopped my career after the 1980 Olympics. I did qualify for, but that would have been the end of it. When I was growing up, my high school team doubled in size because all these men were coming home from college, and women were not coming back. I'm 58 years old. If I was just a couple years older, I probably would not have gotten a college scholarship. So I really owed a lot to that law, and wanted to, again, play it forward, wanted to make sure that other women had those opportunities. When I got to law school, I remember saying to one of my mentors that, gosh, I really like Title IX. I really like this work, but it isn't going to be over by the time I graduate. That's like the big joke of the world, because here we are. It is however many years later, 25 years later, 30 years later, and women still lag behind men in every measurable criteria. One of the things we're going to talk about in this session is a project that Janine Kistner, who's on the call here with me, she's our director of operations, and she and I worked together to get data, and we showed that it's actually getting worse for women. It's not getting better. And so we've got to do something about it. So I went into academics when I also have 3 kids, also athletes, also academics, and 3 great kids. One of them, actually, Debbie, I'm going to be in Aiken, South Carolina, not this weekend, but next weekend for my daughter's horse show. So I don't know how far away Mount Pleasant is from Aiken. Anyway, so about 5 years ago now, we started a nonprofit, Champion Women. And Champion Women, we provide the legal advocacy for girls and women in sports. So I have a certain expertise and a certain, right? So rather, I could be doing the cases, right? I could be, doing a lawyer representing coaches and athletes, and I decided not to do that. Instead, our mission is to get change to scale. So rather than just doing, I looked at like my timeline of how much longer can I be doing this, and how much change can I get, and opening up a nonprofit and doing something that I didn't see anybody else doing seemed to be the best way to me. So that's my intro.
And so we call this Championing Women because women have come a long way, but as Nancy will point out, and probably Debbie, and probably all the women on here, not far enough. So, or fast enough, maybe. So maybe without getting into numbers right now, Nancy, why don't you just give us a 35,000-foot view of what you hope Champion Women will do for this generation, maybe even more so the next generation of girls who are getting into sports, who want to play.
We have two major projects going on right now. We just got our second piece of federal legislation passed that applies to the Olympic movement. As I said, I've been teaching sports law or sports administration for over 20 years now, and most of my students do not know that the Olympic movement is governed by a statute. So unlike NCAA sports that are governed by this association of schools that have all come together, instead, the Olympic movement is a statute called the Ted Stevens Olympic and Amateur Sports Act, passed in 1978. And so the first piece of legislation was really focused on doing what we needed to do to protect athletes. So we extended the statute of limitations, so it's 10 years, and we we gave everybody in the Olympic movement. When I say Olympic movement, I'm not talking about 800 athletes once every 4 years. I'm talking about 16 million athletes. So probably when Debbie's kids were playing baseball or basketball, they were part of the Olympic movement. My girls were part of a very local softball program, and it was not part of the Olympic movement. So not all youth sports are part of the Olympic movement. But when you think of most sports that are not associated with schools, okay, most club sports, again, that are not associated with schools, right? So think of all the travel teams and all that. That is what you're talking about. That's how you get to 16 million. And so I had been working on the issue of sexual abuse in the movement. My coach is banned by the Olympic movement for sexually abusing athletes. He was abusing my teammate. He did not abuse me, but his name is Mitch Ivey. It took me and other world-class athletes many years of effort to get him out of sport. He's a dangerous guy. We were successful in getting him out. So in working with the Olympic movement, I had been working with Title IX in schools after sports participation. I started working in sports sexual harassment and sexual violence in schools. And so then I sort of noticed, over here in the Olympic movement, that there really were none of the same protections that students were enjoying, right? So students had, right? So a lot of where I came from was sort of, frankly, my naivete of thinking that if the Olympic movement just knew how bad it was for girls and women out there, from what I saw of coaches looking at athletes as prey, this is where they got their romantic and sexual partners. I bet Debbie and I can name off 24 coaches that married their athletes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right, Debbie?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And you don't see that in other professions or in medicine and law, and you have these oversight governing bodies, and really there was nothing. And it was intentional. It took me a while to kind of figure that out. We were working really hard, and then when the Nassar situation hit, then kabam. When Nassar hit, it gave us a window to be able to make really systemic changes within the Olympic movement. When Nassar hit, then other types of abuse that have been happening throughout sport had a platform to be able to speak about, right? So when track athletes came forward and said that they were discriminated against for pregnancy discrimination, or when you saw that Michael Phelps came forward and said there was no help for mental health. So he had a platform to be able to speak out about that. You had the revelation that the NCAA's, revelation that the Olympic Committee's health insurance didn't cover sickness and injury. Like, well, if it doesn't cover sickness and injury, right? So all these things, like, it created this avenue. So Champion Women rushed through and we created coalitions to be able to get those changes. So first piece was in February of 2018. We just got the second piece passed through the Congress. Whether or not President Trump will sign it, we've been told by both the House and the Senate Republican leadership that he will sign it. But it is more about restructuring power. It's about giving more athletes on the seat, on governing boards. We say that if athletes had been sitting at the table, that they would have made different financial decisions on what was important. So there have been 4 major reports after Nassar that came out. Ropes and Gray, Borders Commission, the House and the Senate, and all of them concluded pretty much the same thing, which is that it was the athlete intentional powerlessness that allowed Nassar to be able to abuse these women. And so how do you deconstruct that? How do you give them a seat at the table? We say if athletes had been sitting at the table, they would have funded, for example, the U.S. Center for Safe Sport 10 years ago, but they wouldn't. They did not want the legal duty to take care of athletes and make sure that they're in court right now, trying to prevent themselves from having a legal duty that would apply to any cases that happened before we got the statute passed, right? So one of the major things that we got with the 2018 statute had to do with changing what one of the purposes of the Olympic movement is. It's not money and medals. Those 4 reports that I mentioned earlier said very specifically that pursuing money and medals, that it took away the humanity of the athletes, and that that all the bad things that happened as a result of that. It certainly made the leadership and the staff at the Olympic Committee very rich, but it did not help the financial position, the physical or emotional health of the athletes. It did not lead to better performances. It led to athletes really being damaged as a result. So we have that project going on. How am I doing on time? Can I talk about the second one that Janine is so
Sure.
Okay. Debbie,
Sure.
okay?
Yeah. I'm taking notes and listening and learning.
Okay.
That's why we're here.
All right. Okay, so that's been a multi-year. I'm co-chair, in addition to running Champion Women, co-chair of a group called the Committee to Restore Integrity to the United States Olympic Committee, and or we call ourselves Team Integrity, and or USOPU, United States Olympians and Paralympians Unbroken. We now have 545 Olympians, Paralympians, and elite athletes. We have 200 coaches. We have 120 of the country's sport leaders that you all would appreciate, that have all signed on to trying to get the changes that we're looking for, those governance changes, so that as literally millions and millions more dollars come into the Olympic movement, that some of that gets to flow to athletes. Because if they don't have a voice, if they don't have any financial resources, if they're literally couch surfing, which is what is happening right now, most of them are poor. I signed up for amateurism. There wasn't any money back in my day, back in 1984. It's just not true anymore. But athletes do not, because they don't have a seat at the table, they don't even get the crumbs. So most athletes are literally living below poverty level. And if they don't have family that can support them, they just can't do it. They can't take those years off the professional world to be able to go train. So, so that's sort of coalition building. So a big project that we're doing right now that sort of just happens to coincide with COVID happening is Janine and I partnered up in creating a database where we took the data that comes from the Equity in Athletics Disclosure Act. So there's a statute that requires all schools to say, like, how many opportunities are you providing men, how many sports opportunities are you providing women, and how do you allocate the dollars? So everything from the scholarship dollars to how much you paying your coaches and recruiting dollars. And it's a great source of data out there. But your average family can't look at the EADA and know whether or not is it fair to ask a school to start more teams for women. And so we did that. So if you go on to www.title9schools.com, you'll see that we have this database of every school in the country, not just NAIA, not just NCAA and NAIA and junior colleges and Christian schools and the whole, right? We have every school in the country that receives federal funds, so that's subject to Title IX. And so we took the data, we applied the law to it, and we gave a thumbs up or thumbs down in 3 areas. One is a school providing enough opportunities for girls and women in sports? Meaning, do they have enough enough teams? Do they have enough, are they providing equality in that way? Number 1. Number 2 is scholarship dollars. How much, in order to get men and women to have equal scholarship dollars, how much more do you need to do women need to be given? And third is, we looked at recruiting dollars, frankly, because it is an easy way, just kind of like scholarship dollars, to be able to measure whether or not schools are treating men and women the same way. So when you, it's a fairly superficial level, but it's accurate in the sense of if they don't pass, the numbers and all the metrics and everything only get worse. But if they do pass, then you can keep looking a little further and seeing is that accurate? Are the numbers that they report, are those accurate numbers? So because it's unreasonable to ask your average family to know whether or not they can go to an athletic director and ask for more. Athletic directors will spew the biggest bunch of bull for families to explain why they're not discriminating against girls and women when they are. The key things that I always have to say over and over, I always say, if you want to be an advocate, you want to be in my shoes, you have to, you've heard you guys have all heard the saying that, to be successful, you have to be able to handle failure over and over with no loss of enthusiasm. You've heard that? Okay. You want to be an advocate. And if you want to make change in the big picture, you've got to be willing to say it over and over with no loss of enthusiasm. And so one of the things that I have to say over and over is, number 1, the same number of teams for men and women is virtually irrelevant because some teams are enormous. Equestrian teams, rowing teams, football teams, really big. Some teams are tiny, golf teams, tennis teams, right? So the law doesn't care what kind of uniform the kid is wearing. What they care is the school giving men and women equal educational opportunities? So you count kids, you count opportunities, you don't count numbers of teams. So like I said, a lot of times like school, the family gets stopped right there when the athletic director says, we're in compliance. It has been hard in the cases where we've been trying to help out in that it's heartbreaking for a lot of the students to realize that their school has been lying to them. I'll take 2 cases. One is University of Iowa and the other one is William and Mary. In both of those cases, the school asserted when they cut all these men's and women's teams that they were in compliance with Title IX. And we said, well, here are our numbers. And according to our numbers, it's just not true. Show me your numbers. And they don't have them. We don't have them yet. And so we showed them, here's where we got the numbers. And they all come, every place where we get the numbers is all from the schools themselves. So we're not making.
Should we place it show and tell here?
Sure. So our goal at Champion Women is to get at least 100 lawsuits going in the next year. And So every lawsuit determines two major things, okay? So they come to courts and they want to know, number one, what are the facts? Okay, so either a jury or a judge makes that decision. What are the facts? Like was the light red or green if there's a car accident? And so, here, and sometimes that's hard. You'll have back and forth. It's in a lot of cases, determining what the facts are and whether or not there was discrimination is really hard. I would say in most Black Lives Matter cases, that's really hard. There are defenses that schools or that police departments use all the time to justify why it is that they had a shooting go a particular way. That's hard. In a lot of discrimination cases for both media and coaching, that's really hard. You've got to show that the reason why somebody either didn't get hired or that they didn't get a raise or they didn't get promoted is because of sex. And oftentimes the schools say, no, it's because, and they have some other wackadoodle reason, but it's much harder. When it comes to Title IX and athletics, it's easy by comparison because there's a factual matter as to how many women are participating and how many men are participating. So this is what we have for University of Iowa. When we worked with the students that wanted to bring a lawsuit, they've already brought the lawsuit. So there are two sources of the facts. One is the EADA, and that's where our project, Champion Women's Project at Title IX schools, shows for every school how many opportunities, what the scholarship dollars should be, and third is what the recruiting dollars should be between men and women. Okay, so that's one source of data, right? Champion Women, our project, comes from the information that schools by law have to give to the Department of Education, and so we use that data. Second place to get data is from the website, from the schools, when it tells people how many people are on the roster. So how many people are on the tennis team, how many are on the swimming team and the rugby team and all right. So you just add those up. So you go directly into Hawkeye Sports and you look at who's on the team. And in every case that I've ever seen, and that doesn't mean that it's true for every time, but in every case that I've ever seen, the numbers get worse for the school when you look at the rosters of what's published on their website. So if you look at the last part of that slide right there, see how it says men, it's 382 are given 382 opportunities at the University of Iowa, okay? And that's looking at EADA data. But then when you look at the roster spots number, that number jumps up to 433. And it's the same story with women, but the opposite. So under EADA, they say they're giving 394 women opportunities. But when you go into the rosters, it's only 384. So, okay, so next slide, please, sir.
See if I can make this work. Here we go.
You're learning, actually, go ahead another slide. That's a little too data driven. Okay, so when you're looking at how many opportunities does University of Iowa need to add for women given their EADA numbers, okay? And the number is between 47 and 61. I'm not going to get into the details of how you do duplicated versus unduplicated count, but a minimum of 47, okay? Most people who walk into the University of Iowa website or to their department or who get recruited there, none of the plaintiffs had any idea that this was true, that the school needed to add, depending on the size of the team, this could be anywhere from 1 to 4 teams that they need to add with coaches and facilities and equipment and et cetera. Okay, next slide. But then when you look at the data that comes directly from the school, from the website, they need to add at least 115 women. Okay, so that is a lot more teams that they need to add for women to be equal to what it is that they're doing for men. Here it is. Now, we didn't even talk about scholarship dollars here, but University of Iowa needs to add, I think it was, Janine, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like $1.7 million in scholarship dollars.
I don't remember off the top of my head what the number is, sorry.
Okay, all right, okay. But, not insignificant. This is just one little school. I mean, when I say little, I mean, as compared to the thousands that are out there. When you aggregate this 100 here and 50 here and 300 here and et cetera, the number for how many opportunities that women are losing every single year is 183,000. Every year, women are losing $1 billion in college athletic scholarships. And the saddest thing about this is that most women who don't make the team and who don't get a college scholarship think it's because they weren't good enough, that they didn't make the team. They didn't get offered a college scholarship. It's just not true. They were discriminated against based on their sex. So we took them through we did a Zoom call, much like this, and we took them through the numbers on if they made all the cuts to men, if they made no cuts to women. Not only do they need to reinstate the women's swimming team that they cut, but they also need to add lots of other opportunities. Hopefully, within the last hour or so, the plaintiffs' lawyers, Jim LaRue and company, have added more plaintiffs so that they have a women wrestler who was 4th in the state championships for the Iowa High School Athletic Association. She did not get a college scholarship. She did not get an opportunity to be able to participate. This is Iowa, where wrestling is enormous. And then also a rugby player. Those are both sports that are on the emerging sport list. The school's not offering them. They have students that are ready, willing, and able to be able to participate in them. So it is marrying really good lawyers who can take the cases, who have the financial wherewithal to be able to go the distance, to be able to pay the light bill throughout the time that it takes to have it happen. If you have attorneys who don't have financial resources, they oftentimes will get very little for plaintiffs and be gone. And so we vet the attorneys and making sure that they can go the distance and leave these athletic departments fully in compliance so that men and women are actually getting treated equally. And then, and with the plaintiffs, is we do the work that it's just so hard for plaintiffs' lawyers to teach this group of parents and alumni and everybody else, like, here's what Title IX is. Janine and I were on a call with members of a conference, right? So these are women at a conference, and these women thought that in order to get treated the same way, in order to get the same media coverage, in order to be able to get the same locker rooms and the same medical care, to not have to wait until after, I mean, they were told they were second-class citizens in a million different ways, and they felt it and they know it, and it's against the law, and it's just wrong. And they thought that, like, they had to strike to get what they wanted, or they thought they had to, to get Congress to help them get equality. And that may be true for the men to be able to say, get some of the television money, or for them, right? That Title IX will not help them because they're already getting so much more than what women are getting. And but all they need is an attorney who can bring the cases and to get the change to scale that we need. Champion Women worked for 5 years. We gave away millions of dollars in free legal work. and it did not work. It was ineffective. We were failing, and we had to figure out a different strategy. Asking nicely, explaining how this is wrong, getting that information out broadly to the entire university community, not just to the athletic department. That strategy failed. So we're moving on to the next level of the strategy and getting lawsuits. I wish it could be done some other way. If anybody has any ideas, we're all ears. But right now I don't have another way of being able to change $1 billion more that women need in athletic scholarships.
Debbie, let me thank you, Nancy. Those are the numbers to me are shocking. Debbie, when you hear this and you've been involved with college athletics all your life, what's your reaction to that?
My first reaction is to thank Nancy and her group for creating some education for us and providing a resource that we all can go to when we want to know the answers. The question is, there's not a lot of people that want to know the answer to that. You know, and athletic departments, which is such big business, especially in the Power Five. I'm wondering, Nancy, where you stand on like football when they've got 100 players and the count just skews it so much on the women's side. Where are you? What do you think about that?
No, Congress has already looked at that like a dozen times. Courts have already looked at that, probably more than that. So if the school's providing that educational opportunity for men, then they need to provide the same opportunities for women. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's rare that athletic departments are mirror images of each other. So men can have men's football and basketball over here, and that may equal 140 athletes. And then on this side, to have 140 athletes over here, you'll have swimming and tennis and golf and soccer and right. So you're going to have right. So in other words, the law doesn't care what the athlete is wearing or what sport it is they're doing. They're looking at, are you treating them the same way? Are you giving them that same educational opportunity? Both you and I were changed dramatically by having that sports opportunity. Imagine every single year, 183,000 women are getting less because of that.
So Nancy gives us a view from the top, and it's incredible, Nancy, and it's heartbreaking at the same time for all the time that I know I've spent in athletics myself. So, I'm always thinking about what's the solution? Like, what can I do?
Yeah.
How can I help? And so, basketball is my sport, and I get concerned that participation numbers for girls playing basketball are dropping, although overall there are more women playing youth sport than there's been in the past. They're just not playing my sport. So what I wanted to do is think about when I was that little girl, when my parents moved us to North Carolina and I was going into 8th grade, and I went over to NC State and I sat on the railing at Reynolds Coliseum and I watched these women play basketball. I didn't even know you could play basketball in college, and I certainly didn't know you could get a scholarship for it. And that's when I decided that that's what I wanted to do. Even though I played multiple sports in high school, and I've always played sports, and I'm still playing multiple sports, I wanted to see how I could help make a difference. So Nancy brings us the view from the top and from a very high level of opportunity and resource. I'm thinking more of grassroots, and I hope this makes sense to some of you that have joined. Like, this is what I was thinking about, what I'm trying to do. So for the last 5 summers, I've had a girls-only sports camp. And the girls-only sports camp is an effort to introduce 20, 25 different sports to little girls that, in theory, if you're 8 or 9 and you haven't had a field hockey stick or a lacrosse stick, or you haven't kicked a soccer ball or basketball, you haven't played, or you haven't had a self-defense class, or you haven't played wheelchair basketball, these are the things you're going to do in my camp. And so, I mean, it's a very popular camp here. It sells out very quickly. As a matter of fact, I'm in a process because I think I'm not going to be traveling as much as I have in the past, and I am prepared next summer to really blow it out, because I think it's a great opportunity for little girls to use sport as a vehicle to provide what what are all the intangibles that we all know sport can give us, but also put you in a sense of a team. And to me, you're always going to be on a team. It doesn't matter where you go, whether you're a family or your corporate workplace, or you actually do play sports, you get to be on a team. So you learn all the things that come with team. And every day at lunch, we have a different speaker that comes in. So I'm trying to put women in front of these young girls that if you see it, you can be it. You know how we hear that said all the time. And so I'm feeling like from a grassroots standpoint, I'm sort of helping this generation of young girls in my area that can be empowered through sport. And so they can understand what opportunity could be available to them, what sports they can play, what they can try. And by putting the football pads on and doing that, or, you know, playing volleyball or whatever we do, it's an effort to try to teach them. And I've had some incredible stories come out of it from little girls that had never done played lacrosse. Her brother played lacrosse, but he would never play catch with her. And now she's encouraging him. And now she's on a team and she's on a travel team. And I'm really hoping that I'm trying to make a difference from the grassroots level and where I am. And then, of course, my community, kids can afford to go to camp, but my next step will be to take it to a Title I neighborhood where there are some young girls that have actually the same issues that all girls have about self-esteem and confidence, and about learning how to be tough and how to fight through adversity and all the things that you want. That's my next step, that I will be taking that concept to some Title I neighborhoods right here in Charleston, in my backyard, where I know that can have an influence. And so I'm listening to Nancy, and it's just staggering the proportionality of the numbers, that they could be skewed that much. And then I think about big business and athletics and how powerful the dollar is inside those athletic departments, and how much that really allows administrators and leaders to hide behind, but also to use as an excuse, but also to protect their own, right?
But Debbie, does it make sense that these schools, that there are plenty of schools that we show that are making, you know, tens of millions of dollars? Why aren't they providing equality? If you've got all these extra money, you've got so much more than you had just 10 years ago. And University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill needs to add over 350 women to its athletic department, needs to add $6.5 million to its scholarship opportunities. So they have new money coming in, and you don't see that impacting opportunities for women. So.
Well, you obviously, I mean, it's an easy answer, right? They choose not to, right?
On the nose, right there.
Well, isn't the, and it's the argument, I guess, that could be used for a lot of things, but the people who have the money don't want to give up that money, correct?
Correct.
And that's why maybe you have to go to court, because that's the only way they're going. The only way they're going to give it up is to be made to give it up.
Yeah, I wish that sort of doing the right thing and like, look, we need to treat men and women equally. I think like we as a country would agree with that statement. I mean, we just had, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg die, and she's revered for what the doors that she opened. And Debbie's talking about all the doors that she's opening for girls and women, particularly who might not otherwise get that sports experience, and who need that financial help and need the entree into that to the sports scene. So even though we all agree that there should be equality, and yet you've got $1 billion difference between what men and women are getting.
Sam Hyman, you have a question if you want to go ahead and unmute.
Debbie and Nancy, I just want to say thank you for your insight. It's been really good to hear some of the stuff that you all have to say. I want to just read something from a book that I finished reading. It's called Untamed by Glennon Doyle. And in this particular portion, it says, when her soccer jersey was issued to her with Lady Bruins on it, she led a revolt demanding that either the lady be removed from the girls' jerseys or the gentleman be added to the boys' jerseys. And that really hit me. And I actually had a conversation with our assistant women's basketball coach about that. And I just wanted to get both of your takes on what that particular point has to say.
Well, I'll go first about, basketball, because that's my sport. It took a long time to get everyone in the media to say men's basketball versus women's basketball. Now they say it equally. Now it's the men's tournament, the men's basketball. So it's more equal in that sense than it used to be. As far as lady, I think they're always ladies. So I don't think it has to say that on their jersey just because you sweat and you're rough and you're aggressive and you play the game at a very high level with a very incredible amount of toughness on you, about you, and certainly mental toughness about you. I think you're always a woman. You're just an athlete. So you don't need to be the lady. You are an athlete. And that's even today at my age, even when I go to the doctor, I say, treat me like an athlete. Don't treat me like an old lady, because that's my mindset, and that's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
Nancy?
That the effort that Debbie's talking about of having broadcasters say the men's Final Four, women's Final Four. Schools had to change the hashtags. That was actually something when I talked to this group of a big conference from all different schools, is that they really wanted this, men's and women's designation equally, that how insulting it was to say that basketball, and the presumption is that that's men's basketball, that they're not included in that. That's one out of a million kernels of the ways that we have to remember that men's sports had 100-year history. Sports was included 100 years ago specifically in order to make better men, to make better soldiers, to be able to protect the country. And it has been a boon for the Olympics, but it was designed, we did that, we merged our sports system and our education system. The rest of the world doesn't do it that way, in order to make a better society, a healthier society. So again, these men had 100-year history. It was designed to sort of inculcate masculinity and masculine traits into the people, the guys that were participating in it. Women coming on board, number one, back in my era, I don't know about you, Debbie, but I was told, and people let me know on a regular basis that what I was doing was not okay from a gender perspective, that I was violating the gender police norms. I was really muscular when I was training, and this very overt, like, oh, you're a world champion, you're an Olympian, you're never gonna find a husband. Like that ridiculous of a, like, but it hurt, I have to say, when I was younger. Sure. So all the ways that sport has changed because women are participating in it, and all the ways that that we've had to reimagine, the very best athletes don't just rely on masculine characteristics. The very best athletes have to pull from the best inside of them. But all of that, the 100-year history, there's still a lot to unpack there, and a lot to, as the women's soccer players saw when it comes to their Equal Pay Act case, there's still a lot for them to do.
Who else has a question?
And if I could just follow up really quickly. And then the other thing that it talked about in the book was how there's this notion that the men have the powerful voice and it's just understood, whereas the women are known as soft and not necessarily overpowering. And at Wingate, where I work, we recently just hired a woman to coach not only the women's golf team, but the men's golf team as well. And So how, from both of your perspectives, how do we get more of that? How do we get rid of the notion that, a woman can't be in a men's huddle and really, become that powerful, authoritative figure? Because I think that's a direction that we need to head. We need to get rid of that stigma that it's just, a man coaching a men's sport being authoritative.
Yeah. So first of all, Samuel, it's such a great question. Thanks so much for asking that question. So a couple things is, if more people watched women's sports, this idea that they weren't tough would be gone, because people that like Debbie, when people watch the WNBA, it's just obvious how beautifully skilled they are and how amazing it is to watch. So there's that. Two is, there are real scientific biological reasons why we sex segregate in participation, right? Why do we have a men's team and a women's team? One of the major questions I got asked all the time, and not so much anymore, but the question was like, why do we have men's and women's teams? Why don't we just have one team and just see who makes it? And the answer is, if you want women to have equal opportunities, they need to have their own team for biological reasons, okay? So that's why you have men's and women's teams, but that doesn't apply to any leadership positions. It doesn't apply to administrative positions, to Debbie's position as a broadcaster. It does not apply to coaching. So men right now have a lock on coaching men. There's no biological reason for it. There's no scientific. There's all these laws that prohibit sex discrimination in all employment, and yet women are less than 2% of the coaches of coaching men, and almost all of them are in those co-ed sports like track and field or swimming, or right where you have men's and women's teams at the same time. Women are locked out of that market, but men are not locked out of the women's market. Nicole Lavoie at the Tucker Center for Research on Girls and Women in Sports has been doing phenomenal research on this issue, and she grades schools on how it is that they're doing on their hiring practices. And so if you wanted to know more about that, I recommend them. But these are all the ways that what Champion Women we do is we're that intersection between sport and sexism, right? So whether it's employment or LGBT, or whether it's pregnancy discrimination or sexual abuse, right? Or participation opportunities and scholarship, right? That's us. That's exactly where we are. Debbie, did you want to add anything?
I don't even know if I can add to that. I was just going to say, Samuel, obviously you're a young man, so you're interested and you're asking. And I think that's a part of telling a story about what you see and how you go about conducting business. I'm always in between. I don't know how everybody else feels about this, but I'm always in between how I feel about the NBA giving, accrediting the WNBA for how good it is. Like, sometimes I wonder, do we really need the guys to tell us how good we are, or do we already know how good we are? Because if you've ever competed and you've watched the WNBA and you're a guy that's played, then you should have ultimate respect for what they do. They're professional athletes. They're some of the best athletes in the world. They play at a high level. Their skill set's very high. They have a high IQ. They have incredible personality. They have a galvanizing quality about them, certainly this year. And I wonder, how come we always have to have the guys to validate how good we are? I mean, unfortunately, more men play sport than women, and maybe that's it. And we're talking about participation numbers and increasing those opportunities. Well, it's not to counter anything that Nancy said. It's actually to enhance every single thing she just said about why it's important to put women in positions where they can. Inclusion and diversity is obviously the buzzwords of what we're dealing with in our society. And it's something that I deal with all the time, through the lens of my son, Frankie, who has an intellectual disability with Down syndrome and is a full-time college student. So, for women, we've felt, I'm sure every woman on this call can probably at some point in their lives has felt not included, not wanted, marginalized, told we weren't good enough, not fast enough. I'll never play at NC State. I'm not strong enough. You know, and those factors that you hear are the things that some of us turn it around and use it as motivation. Yes, I am good enough. Yes, I am strong enough. And if you don't believe it, I will show you. And, you know, part of where I am now in my career and what I think about is because I do get to call the NCAA men's tournament at a very high level. I'm in the first and second round for CBS. I don't take any of it for granted. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, she got that because she's a woman. Well, I worked for CBS for more than 20 years before I even knew they were looking at me, that Sean McManus was even considering me for that position. And he had watched me for a long time. I didn't just get to do it. And even if there was a piece of that they thought it was interesting, that they were going to add me in my voice, it didn't certainly help me keep the job. Because if I wasn't any good at the very beginning, I'd already be out. And I pray that I'm not going out because I love it. It's a big part of what my schedule evolves around. But, you know, I think we've all had to have that moment where, yeah, we do feel like we have to prove it. And for me personally, as far as broadcasting goes, you know, I try to always have the attitude that I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just trying to improve. When I go into the gym, I don't need to prove that I belong there. I'm trying to get better. So I'm trying to get better, Samuel, when I'm covering your team. I'm not acting like I'm the smartest person in the room, and I don't act like I need to prove that I belong there. I feel like I've put my time in. I've done my reps. I'm ready. I'm going to be prepared. I know what it takes for me to cover the game. I know what kind of work it comes with being ready. So I'm trying to improve. So I don't want to have that attitude that I'm always trying to prove something. But I will tell you that there are times where we all get our, you know, shoulders all bound up and ready to fight somebody because they don't believe that we belong there. And so, you know, for me, I kind of go, you know what, bring it on. I welcome it. If you're going to micromanage the way I call the game, that's perfect for me because I'm going to welcome that pressure. Bring it. I want to be under that microscope. I'd rather be under the microscope and have the opportunity to succeed, not just for me, because I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for a lot of reasons. But I mean, family, responsibility for people coming up after us. There's a huge responsibility there. And I saw Beth Mowens was on this call earlier. Beth and I feel the same way about this. She also advocates very strongly to have women have an opportunity and a voice inside sport to be able to share. My voice is different than Nancy's because Nancy Nancy and Champion Women are doing some amazing things to help all these women right now that are playing in college and all the young women that are coming up. And I always wonder this, Nancy, because I have 3 boys, and obviously my boys they're great and they're respectful and they understand and they've heard it for, you know, about why it's important to treat people the way you want to be treated. And, you know, women can do anything that men can do. I'd be shocked if my boys ever said anything other than that. But I kept waiting for this wave of change coming with all these men that had daughters. And I kept thinking that the numbers that you throw out makes me think that it's not happening. It's concerning. It's a little scary.
Some of our donors, biggest donors, are men with daughters who want their daughters to get exactly what you and I got out of sports. There's actually research, amazing research, showing what a sports experience does for the research. You can show causation when it comes to girls and women participating in sports. It's hard for men to show that it's sports that did it for them when it comes to men. But part of what Champion Women does is we write amicus briefs to courts in Title IX cases and explaining it's not about swimming back and forth in a pool. It's not about taking a basketball and putting it in a hoop. It's all of those things. And sure enough, we can show that sports isn't just associated with more education, it actually causes it. It's not just associated with better health, it causes it. show that it causes staying in the workforce, being in the workforce, that, all these things of, 100 years ago, why we merged our athletics world with the school system is to make better kids and to have a better society, and how well sports does that. Other after school activities like being on the student government body or being in the band, or those are all valuable experiences, but they don't do it the way that only sports does it. So.
And I just want to add one thing to that, because I know we got to go, Dave, and that is that so does Special Olympics.
Absolutely.
Special Olympics does every single thing that you just said, and I've lived that as well with my son. So.
Yeah, it's no secret that when you have a totalitarian government, a government that is very repressive, that one of the first things they do is they take away sports and physical education and physical opportunities for women, because there is something inherently empowering about being comfortable with your own body and knowing what it can do. And so we need to be cognizant of making sure that that here's what the gap is. One of the things that Janine and I both were shocked when we actually ran the numbers is that the gap between men and women is growing. It's not getting better. The schools are adding men's sports at a much higher rate than what they're adding for women. And so this $1 billion is getting worse. So we had to look at, we wrote letters to every school in the country and told them what their numbers were. And I shared some of those with Dave, and to say, what are you going to do about it? And the truth is, all the letters that we got back they were not going to do anything about it.
Shelby, you have a quick question that you would like to ask? And before you do, Nancy and Debbie, is it okay if I share your emails with everybody on here in case they want to do anything else?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go, Shelby.
Hey, sorry. Okay, so I'm a student at South Carolina right now, and I am actually working on a piece on the evolution of women's coverage in basketball. And I know, it's more from the player's eye. So what would you guys have to say about, the voice, especially on social media, that these players are trying to bridge the gap between, especially in the WNBA? Do you have anything, to speak on that? And, how you guys are using your voice, too?
Debbie, I'll let you go first.
Well, I was going to say, you go, Nancy. Shelby, I live in South Carolina. You can just email me and you can call me.
Yeah, I would
Perfect.
say.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that one thing that the athletes are very cognizant of is, the men's game will have 6 or 8 cameras, and the women's game will have 2 or maybe 4, and that you don't get the A team covering the women's game. They don't have the same level of excitement. They don't put as much into it. And, Title IX requires that schools provide men and women with equal educational opportunities. So, yeah, there's all these different ways. And my daughters went to their second softball practice when they were, I think, 7 years old. They're 15 now, just driving. Eek. And
good luck with that.
Thank you. And they said, "Hey, Mom, how come the boys have a restroom and we don't have a restroom? Why do they have a scoreboard and we don't? Why do they have a concession stand? How come they have stands and we don't? Why do they have a real dugout and we have a bench?" To think that our girls are participating in sports and not seeing these blatant differences between softball and baseball facilities is ridiculous. And the messages that sends them, that takes them into the rest of their life, that they should expect less. It's illegal regardless of where the money comes from. Schools have to provide men and women with equal educational opportunities.
Anybody else have a question before we let these ladies go? If not, let me thank both Nancy and Debbie. It's very enlightening. And I think, as I told you, Nancy, earlier, and I know Deb knows that I like to educate the media and especially the younger ones, although Sam, I think, educated us. Sometimes we don't know what questions to ask. So to have the expertise that you two have has certainly been enlightening for me, and I'm sure everybody on here. So thank you both very much for your time, and stay in touch, and we'll hopefully see you guys down the road.
Nancy, can I ask a quick question?
Wait, real quick. If you want to do two things, if you want to sign up for our newsletters, go on to championwomen.org. And two is we do actually have a lot of press releases. If you let us know that you're a member of the press, we will take that into account. And two is we need money. We need money. We give out millions of dollars of free legal work all over the place. We're doing all this marriage and whatnot, and we need money.
And we can make a contribution if we go to your website?
Yeah, you can make a contribution at championwomen.org.
Just real curious, are there some universities that maybe by intentionality and addition rather than subtraction are really good at the gender equity?
Yeah, who's good? Janine, what's a good college or university that's in compliance that
I see Miami.
There were a couple schools that I remember off the top of my head. There were a couple military schools because they're required to be. But you can really easy, if you go to that title9schools.com, there, one of the tabs has a link to the Google sheet where you can filter the results, and you can just filter for all the schools that are passing on in all three categories. Because we gave an overall pass-fail grade. If you fail one, you fail overall. So you can filter that column just on pass, and then you can see all the schools that are passing. You can filter by state or however you like.
And I assume the best are
Thank you,
probably non-football playing schools.
Not. I can't remember. I can't tell you for sure off the top of my head.
Yeah. Hey, Robert, it's a mistake to blame football.
Yeah.
Football's a sport that has big rosters. So does rowing. There's nothing that would prohibit a school from being in compliance and still having a rowing program. The law's 48 years old. Women have waited long enough. We've had football that entire time, and we need to provide men and women with equal educational opportunities.
I'm a white man. I have nothing but privilege in this world.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both again. I know, Debbie, you have to get to the gym, and Nancy, thank you again. Everybody have a great weekend, and thanks again to Greater Winston-Salem.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you,
Thanks,
Nancy.
everybody.
Have a great
Thanks.
weekend.